I'll go over that.
We'll get there.
We'll get there.
Okay, we all set to start? Okay, so it's 4:04 PM. We'll call the meeting to order. We're continuing our interviews of candidates, and this is actually the last interview. Welcome to Cohasset, Mr. Senior.
Thank you.
So while we're asking a lot of questions, what we're really looking for is a conversation with you and the board. And my question is, what is it that attracts you to Cohasset? And please tell us about yourself, and in particular, how your experience and training qualifies you to help Cohasset meet the challenges described in the profile.
Cohasset is a beautiful community. While my mother's family is from the North Shore, she grew up in Stoneham. My grandmother grew up in Arlington. My grandfather, who I unfortunately never met, was a moderator in Stoneham.
Oh.
And his father was on the school committee. So we have a long history. My mom came down to New York, met my dad, and that's where I grew up and I was born. I was born and grew up. It's a pretty place. And I have been working with the New England StatNet folks at UMass Boston. They've kind of adopted us into the program because we're kind of an outpost in New York, believe it or not. So we've been participating, and I've gotten to know some of the folks there, and that's how I found out about the opportunity here. We had some conversations, and we thought it was an interesting fit, and I put my resume in. So, and again, I think it's been reaffirmed not only by the great tour I received from the fire chief, but also from the staff. I think we had a nice conversation. So, in terms of my background, I am a native New Yorker, but again, my New England roots go deep. In fact, my mother's family, as it turns out, goes back to the very founding of this area, the earliest settlers. Many of them ended up going off to Maine, so they wanted to be farmers, and they didn't really care much about that stuff. So it's funny, when I was doing this family history, an 11th grade teacher got me engaged. Go back to your first generation to come to America, and for a lot of us it was Irish or Italian or German or something, right? A couple of generations. I kept digging and digging, and over the years I found more and more and more, and I was telling my mom about some of this and Revolutionary War ancestors, and she goes, "Well, where's the money?"
Yeah,
And I said, "It's a wealth of history."
Wealth, that's where the wealth comes in.
And even on my dad's side, it turns out it goes back to, I was just in Ireland last week with my parents. My dad has a big birthday coming up, so we were able to take him to Ireland. So it was a very good
Nice.
time. So, and still green over there, very green, very pretty
Very
country. I grew up in New York, and I went to school in Boston, went to Boston University. Again, my mom's family was here. My grandmother had taught she had worked at Northeastern and a number of other places, and I'd always come up here as a kid. I loved the city, came to school here, worked in Metro West area for a couple of years after school as a reporter. I worked for a radio station, and I worked for a newspaper. And I covered the Framingham area plus. It was about 14 communities. Some had representative town meeting in Framingham. Marlborough was a city, and then some smaller communities that had open town meetings. So I got to cover all of that. I got to see the different aspects of government. And back in, the town manager was just becoming a bigger thing. This is the late 80s, early 90s. So Ashline was one of the first communities in that area to have a town manager, so I got to cover some of that. So I got to see the different variations, very different from what I grew up with in New York. And after a couple of years, I decided to go to law school. And I ended up going back home to go to law school. And then in that time, I spent a summer in Albany with the state government, getting more government exposure. Government had always been something that really interested me. I was in private practice after law school for a little bit, and then I ended up working for North Hempstead, the place I work for now. First as an aide to a councilman. I spent 2 years with him, doing everything. I mean, he was a brand new member of the town board, and he was elected at large at the time. And then I moved from that to being the town prosecutor for 2.5 years. And I prosecuted local code violations. I did building, planning, zoning. I went from there, and after that, I said, it's time to branch out. Let's do something different. And I answered an ad in the Washington Post. I ended up in Washington, D.C. with the National Association of Home Builders. And I was there almost 5 years. In fact, I was just on the phone with a friend of mine on the way up here today who I used to work with. And I got to travel the country. I got to see how people did planning and zoning and home development all across the country. In fact, I spoke at a conference on Cape Cod one summer. I was up in Maine. I didn't actually. The one consultation here in Massachusetts was just over the phone. I never got to travel up here for those purposes. But smart growth. We did a lot of work on smart growth and all of that. And it was a great experience. I mean, I got to see the country, and I got to meet a lot of really great people and see how people did things in other areas. I got lured back to come back to government, and I worked for the county of Nassau, which is the big county where the town is, where I grew up. And I was the counsel of the planning commission, and worked with them. And then I ended up getting asked to come over to the town of North Hampstead, and I've been there for 10 years, back as the deputy town supervisor. So, and again, there's a lot in my resume. I could go through any particular questions you want. But I again, local government, public services really matter to me. It's something that I like to be able to go home and go to bed and know that I did something. You know, it may be small, but it matters. A good friend of mine from law school once told me that he felt like all he did was move money from one corporation to another. With this, you actually feel like you make a difference in people's lives. Hopefully for the better, and you try to do the best you can. And sometimes it's not even noticed. It's something that may be very much behind the scenes, but it doesn't matter. It's you know that you did it, and you work with people or you help somebody make a difference. So.
Can
Thank you. Yep.
Do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I just wondered if you could sort of explain a little bit about the deputy town
Oh, I can't
supervisor,
believe
because
you took
clearly
my
the
question.
structure for your community is different than here.
Yeah, let me
I still have a question?
if you don't mind. These are some slides that I've done from a multiplicity of programs I've given. I've spoken at a bunch of conferences over the years. May I
Sure,
approach
yeah,
it?
yeah.
Okay. This is just this will help.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We're visual learners,
Thank
so
you.
this is
Okay,
good. Yeah.
So that's a map
Thank
of
you.
the town. We're on the North Shore of Long Island. Great Gatsby. Anyone seen Great Gatsby or read it?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
East Egg, West Egg. That's what this is.
Yeah.
We're a little different today than we were 100 years ago. But there's still a lot of. It's a very pretty community. So, matter of fact, the North Shore is much like Cohasset. It's on the water. It's not quite. It's not quite as ledgy, and it doesn't have any pretty rocky outcrops. But it's a pretty place. We have an active waterfront community, and we have a excellent schools. We have, as you can see, we have about 226,000 residents, and it's a pretty big place.
Yeah.
But if you turn the page, you'll see why it's not as simple as it looks. There are 31 villages in the town, separate entities. Every resident of the town is a resident of the town, but if you're in a village, you're also a resident of the village. And the villages do zoning, planning, garbage, roads. Some of them even have their own police. They can have their own fires. A couple of them have their own water districts. There's 31 of them. And again, some of them are literally just subdivisions that broke off to protect the zoning in 1920. Some of them were along the main rail lines, and they developed as villages back in the turn of the last century. But there's 31 of them. And so it makes it a little, so we do certain services for 100,000 residents and other services for all 200,000 residents. So it's basically, it's parks for everybody, community services, general government, all of that, our senior program, all of that is done for everybody. And then, planning, zoning, highways is done for the people outside the villages. There's also other services are provided through special districts. New York, once upon a time, decided that if one area of the town wanted something and another one didn't, you didn't have to all do it. So, so one area might have a water district, and then maybe the farm didn't want it, and later they created a different water district for him. Or maybe they wanted a library here and they didn't want one here, or they didn't need one here. So you have a multiplicity of districts. So sewer is handled through districts, water, fire, library. So I won't go too much deeper into that. But it's put a premium on intermunicipal cooperation and a lot of partnering. And we've done a lot of that. In fact,
Okay,
that's some of the slides later. but-
Before you get into that.
Go ahead.
Especially given some of the districts that deal with utilities, do each of those districts have their own bond issuing authorities?
No, water and sewer have to come through the town.
Okay.
So, in fact, the town brokered a very large sewer. There were literally two sewer plants down the road from each other. One had been built by the village and one built by a district, which part of the village was in the district. And they were both required to upgrade as a result of the higher standards the EPA has put in. And they were going to go independently and build two new plants. And the town said, hey, wait a second, what are you doing? That doesn't make any sense. And, oh, no, we really want to do it this way. The town supervisor said, we're not going to approve any bonding for a second plant, so you might as well get together. And they got together and they built one plant. In fact, it's almost ready to open. I think it's actually functioning now. They haven't tied all of the old plant in yet, though. So it was a big savings. I mean, the plant is still $70 million, that was different than spending $140 million.
Got it. Okay.
So yes, we do oversight on that. One of the things that when we started as well, and this is a little bit about what I've done a lot of, we weren't really measuring what we did when we started. And I don't mean that just from a performance measurement point of view, but there wasn't even a consistent, you may have called about your garbage and called me and then called Tracy and then called other people because it was no centralized point of contact. And we said, hey, let's not do that. The supervisor got elected and said, let's do a 3-1-1 system. And let's measure it and manage it and tell our constituents what we're doing. So we started with very little, and then we started to put together performance measurements. And that's one of the things I spent a lot of my first few years working on. And we did it with staff. I was just talking to the staff inside. It wasn't a top-down. I mean, there were some metrics that said, okay, we're going to fill potholes in 48 hours. That's just a mandate. But a lot of them were built, well, how long does it take to plant a tree? Well, it could take 6 to 12 months because we only plant twice a year. So if you miss the planting season in the spring or the fall, you're going to have to wait. And if we've used up our allocation, there's a waiting list. You may have to wait the following year. But at least by knowing that, people could have a reasonable expectation. It's like, it's a little different. I know I understand. But that helped a lot. And that's just one example. So we did that with staff on a whole lot of measurements. And it was a matter of also determining what pieces went into something.
You understand that our primary issue is cutting the trees down, right? As opposed to
Yeah,
planting.
dead
Well,
trees.
They grow
Just
fine.
maintenance,
Well,
trimming,
after
yeah.
Sandy, for
Except
us,
for the
that was
one
a
up
big
by
issue
Joey
too.
Place.
Yeah, Sandy, that's right, you were hit.
Yeah.
Tree trimming is one of our hottest issues, believe it or not. It really
I
is.
believe it.
I mean, our community was, it's part of it is as old as here. We were settled in the 1600s as well, but a lot of the subdivision areas were built in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, and some of the trees are reaching the end of their natural lifespan, and there's a lot of work to be done to stay on top of that. We lost a lot of trees during Sandy too. So we developed all the staff. We developed performance management with staff. And again, we also use them. We use them as goals and incentives. They're not meant to be punitive. I mean, not that we don't hold people to the standards, but for example, with the highway department, we hold up. Okay, this crew is doing this level of. They have 80% done. This crew is doing 90%. This crew's at 100%. Well, why are you at 80%? And they'd have a friendly rivalry between them. And it also helped us reallocate resources. You're talking about tree trimming. We discovered that potholes weren't an issue. We were filling them in 48 hours. Tree trimming was a big problem, so we ended up putting more resources at it. But we didn't know it. We didn't have the measurements together. But by knowing it, we were able to say, okay, we need to do this. Can we move the resources board? Yes. So that's what we did. But without knowing that, you couldn't do it. So the whole concept of measurement and managing, tie together. And again, the private sector is doing this forever, right? If you don't have inventory control, you can't run a business. Well, government's much the same, and it's been a very late adopter of these things. And I think whether you're a small community or a big community, this kind of stuff matters. In fact, UMass Boston has a program that they'll send someone out to partner to do this. And I don't think you're doing it now. And if you asked me to come here, I would very much encourage the town to take part in that program. It's grant funded. They have, and they'll send someone out to partner with you and another community to help build performance measurements. Again, people in this day and age, everything is instant, right? Twitter, emails, texts, whatever. The annual report that's done is fabulous, except it's only done once a year. I think people need to understand what's happening every day. I don't think people appreciate, most residents in most communities don't know what government's doing every day. And I think it's important that get out to people. I mean, the website's there. Push that data out. And again, it's a collaborative. What is it that you want to report? What do people want to know? And it's a matter of building that. The police department and fire department keep statistics all the time. In fact, most departments do, right? So it's a matter of getting them out and putting them in front of the public, and also finding out, are we hitting our goals properly? And we've done a lot of that in North Hempstead. And again, there's a couple of examples of reports that we do. I mean, these are just examples of things that we've done. This is a highway yard report, and you can see whether or not the top just shows the number of requests, and we have 4 highway yards. So, and then, are they meeting their days? How many, for example, in this case, the New Hyde Park, they have the most requests, but they're also taking a day and a half longer than the Port Washington yard. Well, why? What's going on? Was there an issue? So we meet on this on a regular basis, monthly or bi-monthly, and we'll go over the numbers and say, well, what's happening? Was someone, was it Sandy? Is that the reason we're so far behind? Was somebody sick? Did something break down? Or was there just a big performance lag for some reason? And again, this is another example of one that we did. This is for performance management for our Project Independence. We have a robust program that started with 2 little census tracts, and it to help seniors age in place. Rather than have people shut off to retirement homes or move out of state, the goal here was to link seniors with services. Not that, some of which we provided, but most of them we didn't. Just like, you do a lot of this now too. There's all kinds of agencies that provide services, but most people don't know about them. So by becoming that link, we were able to help seniors, whether it be simple tasks like fixing a leaky faucet. Instead of calling a plumber for $150, there's a program that'll come in to do it for free.
Right.
Or maybe reaching something that you couldn't get out of that cupboard up top, or helping put in a rail in the bathroom, simple things like that, or even helping clean up your yard in the fall. We were able to partner with agencies that already did that kind of work, and we did also more robustly visiting nurses and social workers, and it's been huge. Now, the biggest single issue for us, which I'm sure is here too, was transportation. If you can't drive, you can't. It's hard to live in a suburban setting. We were able to partner. We had our own bus system, and it wasn't really working very well for seniors. You'd have 5 people on a 40-passenger bus, and they're rambling around. We were able to partner with taxi companies. Slow time of the day, middle of the day. We were able to get a subsidized rate, and seniors can call. They book their taxi, and they bring them to the supermarket, and they bring them home. And it helped the private sector. It helped the public sector. And it worked for the seniors. And we book thousands of rides through our 301 system. Without the 301 system, we couldn't have done that. Without that call center, we wouldn't have had the place to do that. Because we're open 7 days a week now on the call center.
Great.
Well, it's not as crazy as it sounds,
Yeah.
by the way. We were tracking call volume on the monitors for the system, and we realized the calls were coming out on Saturday, so we opened. And we realized calls were coming on Sunday. It's not all day. It's only 10 to 5.
Right.
But people might be booking their taxi trips for shopping that week. They might be finding about an event, and that they can talk to a live person. And I was a little skeptical. I thought that more people would go to the web. Right, I do that all the time. But when people want to call about a government service, they like to talk to a person. If you see a pothole, if you see a light, you'll send an email, but you want to talk to somebody. You want to know that somebody heard you.
It's on it.
Exactly. and that's why our call center has been so successful. It also, by the way, allowed us to point people at one place, one phone number. We haven't got we got the 311 exchange, but it doesn't have to be 311. It could be any number. That way, you wouldn't have to call. You wouldn't be calling randomly the tax office for highways or the senior office for the clerk. Or, I know that person. That person can help me. It became much more. In fact, the highway superintendent said, "Hey, people would call me. Don't call me. Call 301. Call it in. Plug it in." And I guess our call center. This is actually a picture from just earlier this year. We reached our 1,000th call, and that's actually Senator Schumer taking the
Yeah.
call because he actually won us the grant. And I'm actually hiding in the back in the picture. So. But that's our call centers on our new. Our new community center in the basement. So it's a beautiful, beautiful facility. Another thing that's placed a premium on, as I said before, was cooperation. And we did some programming early in the administration about partnering. And we had a robust highway department. And we were able to help smaller communities within the town with things like curb repair or sweeping or even paving. They'd piggyback off our contract. Now, in this case, I think it'll be more regional, right? Maybe for example, we rented a vac hall to clean out drains. Well, we would use it, and then we would share it with other communities because we didn't need the whole of the rental, and that way we'd get a cheaper price, and we'd do it. Or shared equipment. Our dental plan, for example, we put a lot of our villages joined our dental plan because it was a better plan, and everyone saved money. And one of our actually favorites, and it's just a great visual, was actually this is just a picture of the vac hall that was cleaning up the drains. Was our sign shop. We have a sign shop, and we were able to make signs for villages at a lot smaller price. So and this is actually a picture of just some of the display. This was that part of a program that they had done for the villages.
Oh.
So we could do that for them less expensively, and we had the resources, and in fact, by partnering, we were able to put more resources into the program to do more signs. If we weren't. We wouldn't have done it on our own, but because we were doing more of it, we upgraded the equipment, and so we actually do a regular business now supporting it. And again, I'm not suggesting that you build a sign shop and start selling things, but that's just an example. I'm sure there are things just like that here that can be done cooperatively. And again, it's just a matter of saying, hey, what is it that we work together on more efficiently? What is it that we can share services on? And it's about, it's in case it's a little easy, right? You're selling signs. There's no questions about about autonomy. You're not taking anyone's autonomy by selling them a sign. But sometimes shared services can cross that line, and people get a little dodgy about it. And in this case, we've been able to break through that by showing that we're partnering and we're doing this together for all of our residents. It really helped. And again, these are just some examples. So and then again, this is actually a picture from Washington, one of the first years. I didn't have any gray hair in my picture in my beard. We went to Washington a lot. I think staying in communication with our representatives was critical. We did a lot of lobbying during the go-go days of earmarks. But even since then, we've stayed in touch, and I think it's important. We happen to have 2 Congress members who represent the town, one the north and one the south side. You just have one, but important to stay in communication. You have 2 very important senators. It's good to stay in communication. There's always grants, there's always opportunities, and it's important to stay plugged into them. And of course, your state reps and all that too, obviously. Boston's an easy trip. You don't have to go anywhere,
Right.
just up the train line. Well, actually, I shouldn't say it's a 20-minute drive. It's a lot more than that, depending on the time of day.
Right.
You have a train.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's good.
probably a lot easier than driving, I'm guessing, at least during rush hour. But I think it's very important. We did a lot of that too. So we were able to bring millions of dollars in grants and direct earmarks to the town over the decade by just being engaged. So that's just a little bit, little visual. So I hope that was helpful.
Thank you.
What more? I'm sure you have a lot more questions. So please.
Yeah.
Diane, do you want to say? Yep.
So now I'm going to take you down into the weeds a little bit, just in terms of your personal management style. In a town is the way the question was written when we discussed questions was the town is a complex organization. So it's complex on a much smaller level than what you're used to, but the constituencies, whether it's the employees, the residents, the volunteer committee members, et cetera. If you could kind of describe your personal management style with each of those constituencies, and then, how you work to get them talking to each other and working cooperatively.
As I was saying when I sat with some of the department heads, I'm a very collaborative guy. And as I said, government is the ultimate team sport. We're not individual players. We don't get anything done by ourselves. And it's important to have good communication, good exchange of ideas, regular meetings, and again, regular input. And, decisions still have to be made, but you want to get the best data and the best information. So I prefer to build consensus where it's possible, and I want to hear people out, and I want to provide information, and I want to make sure people are talking to each other, making sure that information is flowing up and down, and crossways, and you have the great resource of so many members of the community who take an active role in all kinds of aspects, and that's great. I mean, they're bringing things to the table you couldn't otherwise get, right? You wouldn't be able to afford a lot of that knowledge, and that's a resource that I've never been able to tap, which is fabulous. I mean, it's something that actually excites me to be able to sit down with folks who come from private and public sector experience, who could, are giving of their time and their resources. Again, I've a lot of experience, but as I was saying before to your department heads, I don't think I'm coming in here with all the answers by any means. In fact, I'm here to hear what you all want to do. I mean, my job is to implement your policies, right? And I want to help work with you, and if I have some ideas which I think will help, or some caveats that might direct you in a different direction, I would most certainly want to share them with you. It's my job to do that, but my job is to build and develop and get things done. So again, it's not me saying go do this. It's like, okay, we need to get this done. How do we get, what do you bring to the table? How can we get this done? And again, in the early days, it's, well, how do we do things? Why do we do it this way? How do we do it this way? I think it's a healthy thing to be able to do that and say, one of the things that was raised was HR. Now, I've done a lot of work with HR issues with our town. Now, we have 400 some odd employees, plus another 400 or so part-timers at any given time. So we have a bigger operation, but the same issues apply, getting healthy feedback on how you're doing, getting training opportunities, making sure that people have the resources they need. That's all what HR is. You don't have to have a department to do that. You should have a policy, and I think that should happen. We actually finally did an employee manual, which I thought was very helpful. And we've started doing orientations for staff. We thought that was a helpful thing too. So, and also, one of the folks that our golf course is actually run by an outside management company. And a prior GM had told us about a program in a community he was in California where staff actually got to go to other departments and see what they did. Make sure that, everyone has been to the fire department, everyone's seen the schools. So it's not just that, you see what really goes on, and I think that would be helpful too, to, everyone, kind of share a day with someone else and see what the job is, so you can appreciate what they do and what they get done, so.
Okay, this, you've said some of it, but what I want to ask you, what are your how have you grown as a manager, and what are your two top strengths, and what are your weaknesses? And are you trying to improve on your weaknesses? Are you having any success? Describe all of it. And you're working, what you've been saying, I can see. You've been answering the question, but a little more detail?
I think I'm a very tenacious guy. I will dig in and work a problem through. I have a good analytical mind, part of being an attorney. I'm a journalist. I'm a pretty good communicator. And I've been doing leadership since I was in Scouts as a kid. So I'm, working up through an Eagle Scout and at my church and in the community organizations. And again, you don't get anywhere without working with people. It's not, you're not dictating outcomes. You're collaborating with people. And you're finding out the resources of the group and making the best use of them. And that's I think some of my best strengths. I mean, my goal is to help you do your job better too. Because if you do your job better, I'm doing my job better, and we're all succeeding, right? And part of my job is not, I'm going to get into the weeds sometimes. But I also want to make sure that you're getting the resources you need to get the specific job done. I may not be doing it, but I want to make sure you have the resources that you need to make sure that the policies are getting carried out at the departmental level. I've sometimes lived my job too much. Now, that may not necessarily be it's a problem. I mean, so I've been trying to, to balance that out. I mean, work is not everything, right? I just came back from Ireland, took my parents there, and I had a great time. We usually go on a spring training trip now. I've been taking a week, and I've seen JetBlue Park in Fort Myers, beautiful place.
Go for it. Go for it.
I'm sorry.
We have to
We
know.
have to end this right now. JetBlue Park is
Yeah, we
not where
know.
the Red Sox train.
Yeah.
I just want everybody to know that.
And the fake green monster and the whole thing. It's actually kind of cool. But I'm actually a Mets fan. I got to admit that. I'm going to admit that up front.
All right, all
We're
right.
actually okay with
But you've
that.
won a lot of World Series since '86, so you don't have anything to complain about.
No, National League's okay.
Yeah,
So,
we'll go.
I'm a Met fan.
We'll give you that.
I'm a Met fan. I won't. I promise I won't hang my Bill Buckner, Mookie Wilson photo prominently. It's in my office now. I'll leave it at home. That might be the only World Series I see. Who knows it?
Right.
In my lifetime. And I think that's one of them. And I think that it's healthy to have a balance, and I think it's important for employees to have a balance too, right? So, and I hold people to high standards. I hold myself to a high standard. Sometimes that's a challenge, And again, and we make mistakes. I mean, we're not perfect. We're going to make mistakes, and it's not the making the mistake that's the problem. It's how you address it and move on. And I think I've gotten a lot better at that. It's not an ultimate failure. It's okay. Let's move on. Sometimes things are big, but instead of throwing on recriminations and just get it fixed and move on. You don't necessarily forget it, and you may have to take action on it. But I think I've gotten a lot better at that, which is an important element of moving forward, right? I mean, people make mistakes. I'm human. I admit right up front I'm going to make mistakes. And my goal is to fix them and try not to do them again. Is that a good answer?
Thank you.
Can I follow on with that?
Sure.
Just a very quick question. Martha was talking about how have you grown as a manager, and it occurs to me after reading through your background that one of the areas that will provide you with great opportunities for growth is working within a town meeting form of government. How do you see that, given that you've been outside of it, how do you see that being different, and how do you see that being a benefit to working in the role as a town manager?
I think one of the unique aspects of it, and it's right. It's original American democracy, right? It's original American democracy. Every voter gets to speak their piece, and you're engaged. And quite frankly, that's one of the greatest parts about it, right? You're actually working with the community, and they're speaking with their voice right there. There's no filter. That could be actually a challenge too, right? I mean, because it's everyone's responsibility to come to a meeting like that with knowledge and be prepared, because you're actually performing government responsibility. So it's important that that information get out so people can learn and understand it. But it's also important for people who come to that meeting to be prepared, so you don't waste a lot of time asking questions that you should have read at home, or also so that you can have a good, intelligent conversation. I know things go on for days, but people only have so much time too, right? So I think it's going to be. I think it's an exciting opportunity to really be part of that. Obviously, most of the work is done right here. Town meeting doesn't meet all the time, but I think it's kind of an exciting opportunity to really. It's the community there, right? And again, I covered it as a reporter, and it was fascinating. Framingham was representative because it was just too big a town, but a lot of other communities were just were open, and I mean, I can't imagine that you're going to get 2,000 people at a town meeting typically, but the people who come are really engaged, and that's right. If you're coming to that, you're engaged. You have something you want to say, and you want something to learn, and I think that's great. I mean, a lot of communities outside of this region, that doesn't happen, right? People vote once a year, maybe twice a year. That's it, right? I mean, you really have a stake in your community when you take part in something like that, and I think it's a great thing.
Steve, it's your turn, I think, even though you just,
Already?
your regular
Already?
question, that was a follow-up, yeah.
Chris, have you had experience with an entity intruding upon your authority? And if you did, how did you deal with it?
Could you be a little more specific?
Wait for town meeting.
Okay.
No, specifically, what I'm asking about is that in your current role or in previous roles, you probably had defined areas of authority, either by title or by town charter, whatever the document was. Have you had instances, or have you had the experience in which you've had somebody or some entity, some other organization or sub-organization, essentially intruding upon your area of responsibility? And if you had that, how did you deal with it?
I think the answer is yes. I think we've all experienced that kind of a situation where we've had a specific responsibility, and someone may kind of interject in a way that is either unexpected, okay, unplanned, or maybe not even permitted. In the legal world, there's very limited kinds of communication, right? And that can get you in a whole lot of trouble if you're talking to the wrong people or saying the wrong things. But I think it's important that people do communicate, but they understand there's a process for it, right? And there are times when it's appropriate, and there are times when it's not, and there's also boundaries, right? In New Jersey, I was at the ICMA conference in Boston, and I was a speaker actually in September here. And I was talking to a gentleman from New Jersey, and in New Jersey, it is prohibited for elected officials to talk to staff, except for the manager. You have to work everything through the manager, and it's a law. And now, obviously, in my town, it's not like that at all. In fact, elected officials communicate with staff on a regular basis. Now, that said, the staff are then supposed to be very polite and come back and say, okay, Councilman X has asked for this. Is it in the plan? Is it in the capital plan? Is it here? Or is it just something routine? And then we go back and figure it out. Sometimes it's just it's educating. It's like, well, if you have a question, just ask me. And again, for example, here, I want to be the resource. I want to make sure the information is flowing back and forth. I'm sure that people. I mean, you've been living here. I mean, the staff are not foreign. They're probably your neighbors, and they'll be my neighbors too if you select me. And but there are still boundaries. There's certain things you shouldn't be lobbying some staff member to do a special project. It shouldn't happen. I mean, if you're asking a question, that's okay. But most of the time, there should be a more formalized flow of information. And again, the town manager system is set up for that, right? You set policy, you challenge me to implement it with the staff. That said, I think I need to be in regular communication with you folks too. I mean, to know what it is you're looking to do. I mean, it's everybody's community, but you're elected to set and chart that course. So it's important that that communication flow happen, but that people understand that there are certain processes at times where it has to be a little more constrained. Is that a fair answer?
No, it is. Again, your answer is going to be personal and based upon your own experiences. Many of our questions are simply drawn from the broader sense of what we have seen in our experiences.
I mean, you always have a moment when sometimes you have to just turn to me and say, stop, right? That happens. And, that's rare. You shouldn't have to do that very often. But sometimes you do. You sometimes have to draw the line and say, hey, you can't be doing this. Just stop. And you hope that ends it, right? And then you explain why. Maybe people just don't get it. I've had that happen. Mm-hmm. People doing things they didn't understand were wrong. I'm like, hey, wait a second. You shouldn't be doing that. And here's why. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And sometimes with purchasing too, right? I mean, that's one area. Don't be talking to the bidders, right? I'm just trying to get the best price. No, you're trying to get a 3 to 5. That's not a good idea.
Karen?
Lost my place, I'm sorry. Can't ask my question without my notes. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the budgeting and budgeting process. Could you describe your experience in preparing a budget? Who do you involve in the process? And then once the budget is in place, how do you ensure compliance and monitor whether revenue and spending are tracking with the budget?
Having a strong financial team is absolutely critical. And I think you've done a nice job here from what I've read. Things were not always so robust in the past, but I think you've made some great progress. And I didn't get a chance to meet the accounting boss, but I got to meet the deputy, and we had a nice conversation. I'm active in Government Finance Officers Association. I'm an officer back home. It's very important. I think it's been great. I'm an attorney by trade. I have an economics degree. I do get money. But for the last 10 years, I've been building budgets. That's been one of my primary responsibilities, is to build a budget every year. And it's not one budget, by the way. It's, as you saw, it's multiple budgets, right? And it's a collaborative effort, but the departments had started. It's like, okay, here you go. And often we'll start with a memo and say, here are the parameters. Here's what you need to keep within. Here's what you have to factor in. Here's what we expect energy costs to go up, or here's the union contract raise, and but here's the cap. Here's the revenue cap. Please come in within this number. Are there ways that you can raise more revenue? Are there ways that you can cut some expenses? Are there some investments we can make? The budget process is kind of an ongoing thing, right? There's the actual budget has to be adopted, but you're in a, and I know you can do a 5-year budget process as well. It's an ongoing conversation, and it's not just the operating budget, but the capital plays into it too. I mean, I was speaking inside before. We were able to, in North Hampstead, save a lot of money by investing in technology and by improving and upgrading facilities. Modern equipment doesn't need, or stuff that's new and upgraded doesn't have as much maintenance, much of a maintenance issue. Plus, they're not going to break down on you, hopefully as much. And it's important to be able to think about that. It may cost more here, but it's going to save a lot more down the road. And you need to have the numbers to prove that. For example, we did an asphalt recycling machine. I was a little skeptical. We saw it in Greenwich, Connecticut, and we bought it. And it allows us to do a hot patch in the winter, which is a very big benefit. I mean, cold patch doesn't hold very well, ever. May not make sense for a community this size to have one, but maybe if there's enough of collaboration, maybe 4 communities buy one and you share it. I mean, I'm not saying that's the answer. That's just an example. Another commissioner tried to get me to buy a cement mixer, and I said, well, I'll get you the cement to the job faster. I'm like, yeah. I said, I don't know about that. We never bought the cement mixer. But we have, we did handheld scanners and things like that really help with ticket writing, barcoding tax bills. People are in and out of the tax office in 30 seconds or 90 seconds once they get to the counter, as opposed to having someone type everything in. Little things like that made a big difference. There was an investment up front. So I've built budgets for the last 10 years. I built the operating and capital with the department heads all the time and with the board saying, okay, the supervisor is the chief financial officer of the town. Okay. So he'd say, okay, this is what I want in the budget. Go make it happen. And then we go back and we build it, and we come back and have some more meetings with the department heads and also with the supervisor. We talk to the board, And then the supervisor then, in our system, the supervisor presents his budget or her budget on September 30th. A little different process, but it's same basic idea. And then it goes through a board hearing process, then a public hearing process, then it was just finalized last night. It was just adopted last night. We're on a calendar year fiscal basis.
Oh, okay.
So I've been doing capital and budget. I guess I've done $1.5 billion worth of budgets over the last 10 years, something like that. So we're about 130, 140 million combined a year, just in operating. And the capital is 25 to 50, depending on the given year. So is that?
And what about like ongoing, I know you said it's an ongoing conversation.
Oh yeah. I mean, we
I know
we
it's
also
a complicated question.
No, we send out budget performance reports at least on a monthly basis. And again, I ask our frontline. So not only does it go to not only the controller's office checking it, but it goes to all the departments. It's like, okay, here's your monthly budget performance report. Are you on target? I try to look at them too. Now, I don't look at every line in every budget. I mean, it's a big thing. But I'll say, hey, I'll skim it and I'll say, wait a second. And our report will show, if you're a third through the year, you should be a third through the budget. That doesn't work perfectly, right? I mean, there's seasonal expenses. Hey, wait a second, why are you at 2/3? Or why are you at 60? What's going on? Or, hey, you haven't spent any money in the salary line. Is there a mistake? Is something being miscoded? So we try to catch that as early as possible. So we do that on at least a monthly basis. And we do our town stat meetings, our performance management meetings with departments. That's part of the meeting. The meeting is staff, budget, projects, and performance measurements. And I do that every month to every quarter, depending on the department. But departments get that at least once a month. They're getting a performance report, and their job is to make sure that they're checking it too. Now, I'll check it, and our controller's office will check it, but it's important that we're all eyes on it. And then they can say, hey, wait a second. I don't want to be, if I'm catching it, if I'm coming to you, it's probably not a good thing. And that happened last year on something. I caught something and said, hey, something's not right here. And it turned out something wasn't right. But it shouldn't get, if I'm catching it in November, it means you didn't catch it in February or March or April, and, it's not good.
So forgive me, your department heads have budget compliance responsibility?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Because they're the field people, right? They're managing it. Now, again, I have to make sure that they're in compliance too. And again, there might be unusual circumstances, right? And part of it is also learning the cycles and flows. I think I know that better now with our budget, but, parks goes like this, right? Highways goes like this. It depends on, well, at least the snow budget does, right? And there might be, you may prepay something or set aside money for a whole year of elevator contract, for example. So it may look like the budget's 90% spent, but it's really not. You've encumbered it because you're spending so much in electricity or you're buying so many office supplies. And that's all, that's all okay. And there's different systems for that, but it's important to check that regularly.
We have the committees that help. We have advisory board that does the whole budget, and then we have a very good capital budget committee, and Steve was on it 12 years.
I couldn't figure a way to get off of
Separated
it.
out and to help.
So we ran for
To help the, and meeting, and has actually helped the board too, so it's a little different than what you have, because you have a larger group.
Well, I have more staff, but
And more
but there's more volunteers. So I mean, it balances out, right? I mean, you can't do it. We're talking inside. You can't be an island on this stuff because it just burns you out. So it's important to have collaboration, particularly again since it's the taxpayers' money, right? And there needs to be a buy-in right from the beginning. Capital projects not usually a top-down thing. And I don't think people would vote for them if they were. But also I think it's important that as information flows, people can understand, hey, why are you going to want to spend this much money? Well, here's why. The piece of equipment costs this, but over the next 5 years it'll pay for itself. And then we'll save money going forward. Or you need to make an investment in this building because of X, Y, and Z. And here's why it needs to be done for regulatory purposes or operational purposes. We did renovation in our 1907 building. And it's 1907, 1920, and it's a 1950 extension off the back. We were able to renovate the office suites. I mean, the bones of the building were good. It's brick. But there's Category 5, it's Cat 5 wiring in there, so everything is high-speed wiring. There's a Wi-Fi, the building's Wi-Fi. The phone system was upgraded. The HVAC was redone. And then we renovated the offices, and we cleaned them up and put modular, nice, clean. And we work with the departments. Okay, what within reason? what colors do you want to have on the walls, or what kind of modular office furniture would work in your department. And some, in the comptroller's office, it's a higher divide, but you could still, collaborate with people. In some of the other offices, it's a lower divide, so because you're sharing more. And again, it cost a few $1,000s, but it made a huge difference. I mean, we were able to get more space in some of the offices, and people just were in better working conditions. They felt better about coming to work every day.
Yeah, lot
There
more
wasn't feeling
flexibility.
pain.
Productivity, yeah.
Exactly, and that's important to recognize. Now, it may cost a little bit of money, but the productivity gains and the other resources you get out of it, sometimes it's hard to put into numbers, but it's, people work better when they're in better working conditions. I think that everyone would recognize that in the private sector. It's no different here. It's no different.
Steve, you had a follow-up?
I did, and now I'm trying to remember what the heck I was going to ask. Back with respect to budgeting. How do you, when you review the budget for preparation, how do you prioritize? I mean, we've heard from candidates in the past, and of course we have our own experiences with it. But at what point do you take the fresh look, and how do you encourage your managers to do the very same within their departments before just allocating the same sums as the last year?
Right. One of the things that we're doing is we're using performance measurement to also to validate programs and policies. This is a little tiny example. We had an early swim in our indoor pool. We had to bring staff in early, turn the pool heater on, et cetera, et cetera. Well, there were 7 people using it. And so it wasn't remotely cost effective, but until we had the data showing it wasn't remotely cost effective, I couldn't stop the program. Because, and we did. Now, on the other hand, there might be programs we might say, well, hey, what if we advertise it? And we did, by the way, and nobody else signed up, so we got rid of it. You want to constantly evaluate what you're doing and how you're doing it, and I think measurements matter. Now, they're not, don't get me wrong, they're not the be-all and end-all, okay? There's a lot more. There are some things you just do because you do them, and they're not going to be cost-effective necessarily. You make them as cost-effective as possible, but you have to do them. Government's not here to make money. But you want to be wise, and you want to do it the right way. But you want to evaluate regularly whether something is efficient. And I think that's an ongoing question. And so when you're prioritizing, I mean, town meeting, setting the priorities. Here's what we want to do. I mean, we want to rebuild this building. Seniors are our number one priority. We want to rebuild the roads. Whatever the priority target might be. Well, how are we gearing to that? How is your budget filling into that? I don't believe in just setting the line. Well, you got $1,000 last year. You're going to get $1,000 this year. Why are you spending? I want it to be tied back to programs as much as possible too, and it's not going to something that happens like that. It takes a while. What kind of programming do the tax dollars feed? We often have to. I think you do too. We have to present a line on a budget. That's the law. But that doesn't illuminate what that means necessarily, right? And I think it's important that we educate ourselves as well as the public at large as to what that means. Well, these line items create this senior program, or this highway program, or this parks program, or the town clerk's office, or whatever the case may be. And I think it's important to do that in a way that the community wants to see it in, and validates what your priorities are. So, again, I think that having creating those measurements, working on those things, and making sure that the money is actually supporting them is how you build budgets too. It's not just, well, this is what you did last year, this is what you get. This plus 2%, or this less 2%, right? It's not that simple. Staff, you got to build in, right? You got to make sure the staff resources are there. You got to make sure you're paying the electrical bill. You got to make sure there's a contingency, which you build in anyway, in case something goes wrong, or there's a storm, or there's an opportunity. Maybe some piece of equipment suddenly became available, or some opportunity suddenly presented itself to fix a field, or, you want to make sure there's a resource to be able to grab that.
Thank you.
Was that your second question?
No, I've been asking them all.
There was a
along.
follow-up.
Yeah, it was a
So I
follow-up.
think we're just about to start the second round, right?
Yeah.
So it's Diane
This is like double jeopardy now?
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Taxes
now
are
we're
worth
all
twice as much.
confused. Right, I'm losing.
at the end.
I'm going to try to make sure I phrase it in a way that will give us information that we haven't heard.
Why are you a Mets fan? Sorry.
No, I'm not going there. We gotta stay off NFL though, please. The residents as customers are looking for value for their dollar, expecting ever-increasing services and facilities from their municipalities. Describe how you've improved a particular service in your community, the challenges you faced, both maybe financial, political, et cetera, and the eventual success of that improvement. How was it measured?
One of the things I talked about before, and I don't mean to go back to it, but it was the transportation piece that we had with the seniors. We were spending $1 million on a fleet of buses and bus drivers. And we were transporting hundreds of seniors. And there was a need for the service, but it wasn't working. Now, on the other hand, we had 7 union bus drivers, and we had buses that we had invested resources in, and we had mechanics that maintained them, and we had fixed routes and seniors that were expecting their fixed routes to be maintained. So the directive was, hey, this doesn't make any. After we did an analysis and realized that the efficiencies were just not there, we said, okay, well, what are we going to do? And the idea, and it didn't come from me, I admit, was let's try that private sector combo. Well, that had some issues as well. Did you have to bid it? How do you procure taxi services? How do you fund it? How do you make sure that the service is being really provided? You're not getting bills for phony, fake services. So you have to go through all of that. Then you have to work with the union and like, well, you're going to start laying off our bus drivers. We're going to grieve. We're going to sue. So we had to work through all of those issues, and it didn't happen overnight. What we were able to do was some of the buses were wearing down physically, so we decommissioned them. We took some of the bus drivers and we moved them. We took them and we put them in new titles, and we put them in places we needed them. Some went to parks, some went to highways, and then we kept some because we still needed that resource. And then we were able to go through a whole procurement process and get the taxi companies on board, and they were fighting. This is my turf. No, this is my turf. This is my turf. Who gets this one? And then we had to set up the routes. Well, what do they get to pick? Do you get to pick whatever grocery store you want, or do you have to just go to Shaw's, or do you just go to Stop and Shop? And that all got straightened out. And it took a while. And again, we had to work with the union, and then we had to work with the seniors. Oh no,
Right. They're going to do away with our bus
exactly,
service. Yeah.
exactly. And again, that was a radical change.
Yeah.
And we worked, but again, we worked with every interest group. We communicated with everybody, and once it showed success, that was it. We had to push through. There were sometimes you just had to say, I'm sorry, we're doing it anyway. And we did it, and it's validated itself. No complaints. And in fact, the bus drivers are happy too. The couple of the guys went to parks. One guy came to me about 6 months later. He said, Chris, this is the best thing to happen. He is tanned. He had lost 25 pounds. He was in great shape. He goes, I was not happy at the beginning. He goes, but it really worked out well. Now, that doesn't always happen. I'm not going to tell you that every employee comes and says, nice job, right? And we still keep some bus drivers. And we actually won a grant, federal grant, so we actually have 2 hybrid buses that we've maintained in the fleet. So we still use those to move seniors. Mostly, we do a big Fun Day Monday program at the beach, so we bring seniors. So we still use that for other transportation purposes. But so that was again, I think that's an example, and it took some, and it wasn't just. I mean, I was part of this, but the folks who dealt with seniors were really on the front. The supervisor was really the guy dealing with the private sector, getting the taxi companies around the table and saying, we got to make this work. And then it was calling up the assemblywoman and saying, hey, can you get us some money for a grant for this? Okay, I don't know. And then we were. And now we fund it ourselves, not entirely, but we fund, and we've expanded it to medical. We also do medical transportation. That was the other big thing. Shopping, right, is great, but you have to get to the doctor.
Going to the doctor's.
So I think we're using it's a Medicare rate that's somehow established, and the taxi companies take that, and it's worked out again. It's worked out very well. So some people use it all the time, but the biggest thing that came out of all that, and going back to Project Independence, there was an analysis done. The mere fact that people knew the program was there improved their outlook. They didn't even have to use the service. It was just knowing it was there. It was knowing that the program and the service was there. That's what government's supposed to be, right? You want to know that it's there. You may never use it. It's like, insurance, right? You don't want to get into a car accident. You don't want the tree to hit your house. You want to know that the insurance adjuster is going to come and you're going to get a check and it's going to get fixed. The same thing with the government service. People may not even ever use it, but they want to know that it's there when they need it. And that's, Project Independence has been that kind of a success. And I think government services should be that whenever they can be.
Great, thank you.
You know, Cohasset has neglected the HR function and now must be built from the ground up. I noticed you mentioned HR. How would you, with your experience, develop HR for us?
I think the first thing is to assess where you are or where you aren't, I guess. And again, I actually got some great ideas from the staff just before. I think developing some kind of a basic manual is very important, so that everyone could be working off the same information. I think trying to develop some kind of a, I don't want to say, not a top-down kind of an evaluation system, but something where you're collaboratively going back and forth. What are your goals? Are you meeting them? Am I supporting you enough? And I think that's important. Developing some kind of a training protocol so that people have the opportunity to do performance training, to enhance their skill sets, and also to maybe prepare for a different career here. Somebody who might want to move from this to something else, or somebody in the parks who wants to get some carpentry or electrical experience. That would be fabulous, right? If we spend the money to train them, they have to commit to stay, right? There'd be some kind of catch to that, right? I don't want them to go off doing and leaving us, but that may save us a lot of money, right? To have somebody with an electrical license on staff. I don't know if you do or you don't. Some people I have to maintain my law license. I need to go for regular CLEs, but there might be programs that, that'll help us perform this service better or that service better. And going to conferences. Now, I know it's a hard thing to be able to send someone across the country, and I get that. I was able to go to a conference this year in San Francisco.
We do send people to conferences, and we've had, legal counsel has given us an analysis of things for HR. It just completed, so we're in the beginning stage.
Huh?
So, we could use your expertise.
I haven't really. I can't say I've ever built an HR function from the ground up, but it's something that I've worked at it enough that I think I get it.
It'd be a
And
challenge.
it'd be a challenge, right? But I think it's critical. You have to have, we didn't have an employee manual. We didn't have training protocols. Our HR office was really not in very good shape, and we put someone in who really made a huge difference, just from the record keeping standpoint. I mean, records were not being properly kept, and in this age of HIPAA and all kinds of other privacy stuff, if you're not keeping the records right, you can get a lot of trouble. And that is something that we need to make sure happens right.
Well, we'd be probably doing it with the schools, so we'd probably have to hire somebody to do it, because we do a lot with the schools.
I mean, I think growing and also sharing services, obviously across, the schools are part of the government, and this back office stuff that they do, and the same thing that the town does, right? And where you can share and save money makes sense. You just have to make sure that you're not replacing two with one, because that's not necessarily going to help either, though. And I know that there might be ways of, stretching it too. There might be, we've been very successful in bringing some part-time people back. Sometimes they're folks who've for family reasons have stepped out of the workforce, don't want to go full-time again, have a wealth of experience. We can get part-time, great value. We've been very successful doing that. Maybe they're people who just want to volunteer. Maybe they're at the end of their career, or at the other end, they're at the beginning of their career. They're kids coming out of school. We've had our town staff program has had a series of great interns. We have a kid from Northeastern, actually he's from Long Island, but he's doing one of his co-ops, and he's spending a semester with us doing town staff, and he's been fabulous. Then he goes back in December. I'm sorry to lose him, but we're getting two more in the spring, not from Northeastern, but we've had kids from Penn and kids from, and you have a great wealth of kids here who go to all kinds of great educational system. They go to all kinds of great places. If some of them want to come back and work here, you want to tap them, right? You want to have a real robust program. You don't want to just leave them out alone and doing something, but and partnering, like I said, with UMass and other programs that want to send people to help with you. Take every resource that's available, right? That's how you move these things forward.
Okay, thank you.
Steve, your second question.
That I do. You were talking quite a bit about your intersection with unions with regard to the transportation program. How do you handle the collective bargaining process, and who do you like to, or who have you typically involved in the process?
I've been, we have a team, and the town attorney has historically been our lead negotiator. And we've also, and he and I often played good cop, bad cop. I was often the bad cop, actually. And but we had a couple of very successful negotiations, and the last one during the recession was very challenging, and it got to the point where we ended up, the board decided to punt, basically. They adopted a 2-year contract with functionally no, it was a 0 and a 2%, 0% and then a 2% raise, and then we picked it up again and tried to go forward. And we're actually now in a 5-year. We're in the third year of a 5-year contract, or we're going to the third year of a 5-year contract. Again, I think you need to have a team doing it. It shouldn't just be, and I know you have multiple unions, and most of them are very small. I think, and again, I haven't seen any of the contracts, so I can't really comment on any of them. But sometimes there's things in there that don't make sense anymore, either for the staff or for the town. And I think things sometimes have to be modernized. I mean, we had conversations, and by the way, I love government benefits, and I think they're important. I think they're good for the staff, and I think they build morale. But sometimes things are, working 30-hour weeks is just not reasonable. And I'm not saying that's happening, but we have a 33 3/4 hour work week for our staff, and for our union, for our in-house staff, and I'm like, between all the time off you get, I said, you're here 2/3 of the year. I said, I every time I go there, I'm like, don't even try it. Like, all I want is 15 minutes back a day. Give me 15 minutes back. But someday that's going to have to happen. I mean, it's not reasonable. To keep the other benefits, there's going to have to be some occasional readjustment. And again, it's not just money, by the way. Working conditions are really critical. People have to feel good about the job they do. And that is as important and sometimes even more important than the money. I mean, money's important. Don't get me wrong. And benefits are important. But people have to feel that they're valid, that people appreciate what they do, that what they do is important. And I think that's as much of a part of the contract process too, is having that good relationship. And I think you do. I mean, I don't, as far as I can tell. But again, I'm not here yet, so I can't say that every meeting we had with the union was perfect. People yelled at me and I yelled at them, and that happened. But at the end of the day, we have a good working relationship, and we meet monthly as part of our labor management. We have regular meetings with we only have one union. Really? But we meet regularly, and we go over grievances, and we go over issues. And sometimes they're incredibly silly and petty, but they're important to somebody. And sometimes they're really big, and we try to work it out. And I think it's very helpful. Now, you have a lot of unions. Monthly meetings would probably take up every day.
Yeah.
But I think having regular conversations is important. So.
Karen?
Again, you've touched on a bit of this, but now I've got to go back to this page. We talked before about the volunteers, and we're very lucky here in Cohasset. We have so many people that are interested in participating in volunteering time. But, they all have their opinions and their ideas about how things should be done. What is your experience in working with the citizen committees, and what do you think the town manager's proper role is with both the appointed and elected committees or boards? Or
Well, on the second part of that, I think part of it is just understanding the relationship, and I think I'd have to understand that how they're set up. Every committee does that a little bit differently, right? I think it's important to have a good working relationship and to know people and to also to know what the responsibilities are, to make sure they're clear, right? If they're statutory, well, this is what you were supposed to be doing. And if they're advisory, well, this is the goal, right? When I was at the Home Builders, it was all committee. The Home Builders are run by one giant committee structure, and there were 200,000 members. The board of directors was 500 members. I mean, I think it was actually close to 1,000 members. There was an executive committee that was smaller. So when we met, I support the legal action committee. There was a committee on land development. There was a committee on environmental issues, and we'd go and make reports and work with staff. And there was obviously a central staff that did everything, but there were member committees, and we worked with members all the time, and that's how the association ran. When I was working with a councilman, I would help staff committees. We had an ecological commission. We had, at the time, a minority affairs commission. We had a housing authority, which the councilman I worked for was assigned to. So I would attend all those meetings as well and work with the committee members. And again, when he couldn't attend, I would attend in his stead. And I don't attend as many of those now I mean, I do from time to time, but I just don't have enough time to go to all of them now. But I would. I mean, again, I would go to every meeting at least once. I mean, and again, the ones that I need to be at, I'd go all the time. I mean, and I don't want to be at every single night, every single week. But in the beginning, I want to be everywhere. I want to meet everybody. I want to understand what they do. I want them to understand me, and I want to learn. Right. The whole point is to learn, and these committees are set up for a purpose. It's also important, by the way, to look periodically and say, well, okay, we've had this committee for 127 years. Do we still really need it? And it's okay to ask those questions. And the answer may be yes, absolutely. The answer may be, well, maybe not. The town, we tweaked our committees from time to time, and their purposes have changed. The Ecological Commission has really changed, and they're really much more focused on green energy and recycling, and that wasn't the case 20 years ago. They were doing other things. And we actually have the town was redistricted, so we have a minority council district that we have it's not quite minority, but it's close enough, and there's a minority councilwoman from that district. So the Minority Affairs Commission didn't really make any sense anymore, so that went away. But there's other things the town does. We actually run an Asian American Fest, and we run a couple of other ethnic-themed festivals in our parks, and that's really been a different approach. It's also, by the way, important that those committees represent the community as a whole. New residents, old residents, different parts of the community. And it's important that you look at that periodically to make sure that there is a diversity of backgrounds and opinions, right? So, is that?
That does, thank you.
Okay, this is the closing question. We have hit you with a lot of questions in a very limited time frame. It's only fair that we, before we close, we ask if you have any questions for us or want to make a closing statement.
I do want to say I thank you very much. It's been a great opportunity. It's been a great day. In fact, it doesn't feel like it's been any time at all. From the moment I arrived, people have been very warm and very, very sharing, and it's been a great opportunity to see and meet people. It's a very pretty place. You all deserve a lot of pride in this place, and I'm sitting here across from you because I've gotten that feeling, and it's been reaffirmed. I genuinely think it's a very special place, and I think it's a place that's not without problems. And the one question I would pose to you is, I know that you've not all disagreed on this process or how it would work, but are all of you prepared when this is over to stand united behind the person you choose and leave the past in the past and go forward as one? Not agreeing on everything, but agreeing that the decision's made and you're going forward. Because I'm committing too, and I want to be here for a while. You don't have to vote. I'm just.
I'll vote.
Yeah.
But
I happen to think that that's a very important part of what we're trying to accomplish here.
Because I want to be. I'm not looking to come and go. I want to be here, and if you want me here, I want to be here for a while. And again, I could be here for the rest of my career. I'm not saying that I would be, but I could be. It's a pretty place, and it's a place that's a lot to do. And I think that government's changing and evolving, and I think where we will be in 3 to 5 years will be very different than we are today, both from the state's perspective and from regional perspectives, from educational perspectives. And I think there's a lot of exciting things going on at the local level. But that's for you to be ready to answer if we continue this conversation.
Chris, you ask a fair and timely and relevant question. And the short answer is, for me, and I'm the only one that I can answer for, is if the candidate that we narrow to is qualified, and the choice is between 2 or more qualified candidates, and I am on the minority end of that choice, the qualifications live out, and I would like to see the majority choice succeed. At the end of at the end of this process, what we hope we arrive at is a solution that helps our town succeed both today and tomorrow.
That's great.
Fair enough?
That's a great answer. So.
And yeah, I just want to add that agreed. We want success. It's in all of our best interests. Fred and I were on the board when we had to unfortunately say goodbye to somebody that had been in the position for 6 months. And it was certainly not an easy choice. It's something that I probably think about every single day over the past couple of years. And but we had to do what we did, and at that time the board was unanimous in doing that. So our goal is to whoever's in that chair, in whether they're in an acting capacity or in a long-term capacity, is to make them succeed, because that's gonna have, the whole town's gonna succeed. And we did, we were a little bit divided on how to roll out the process and, you know, what steps to do first and second, but we all were committed to a process to hire a permanent town manager, and whomever that person is, they will get, I think, unanimous support, you know, and help and assistance and collaboration and all of that.
That's great. I thank you. I thank you for the opportunity. I hope we get to talk again. But no matter how this all works out, I wish everybody the most success, and this community great success too.
Thank you.
So, thank
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you very much.
I have one little question.
Oh, sure.
Hofstra, is that in your,
Yeah, I went to Hofstra University School of
okay,
Law. Yeah.
so is that in North Hampstead?
No, that's actually just south of us. It's in the town of Hempstead. So,
Okay, so your town is a
yeah, as a
different
matter of fact,
town.
one little, I didn't put this in here because I could go on forever about
Yeah,
town of Hempstead was one big town. Revolutionary War, the north side were the patriots, the south side were the loyalists.
Oh,
The north side said we want to be part of the Congress. The south side said no. So the town, in September 22nd, 1775, seceded from the
Wow.
town of Hempstead.
ah,
And that's how the town was created. Now, that was all well and good until the Battle of Long Island,
Mm-hmm.
which we lost. The leaders were put in jail or went into hiding.
yeah.
And then after we won the revolution and the British finally evacuated, the state recognized the divide. There was no putting the town back together again. And the north was
Humpty Dumpty.
separated.
Yeah.
And there we are.
Yeah.
It was North and South Hempstead.
Right.
And then South Hempstead reverted to Hempstead.
we're all history buffs, so you can
And
stay here and keep telling us
The
this.
clerk actually at the time was from was the north side of town. So we actually have the original records going back to the 1600s.
Wow. Ah.
Yeah, no, we. Yeah. And by the way, the towns have been different ever since. I mean, the North, and we're definitely a little more revolutionary than they are even today.
Interesting, huh?
But they're the biggest town in America. They have 750,000 residents.
Really?
So we're, as big as we sound, we're the small kid on the block.
750,000?
Wow.
Big place.
Yeah, my son's best friend from Cohasset is a freshman at Hofstra, so,
Oh, great. It's a good school.
yeah.
In fact, I'm going there Saturday.
Football game.
One of my very good friends, middle son, is playing in the Nassau County Football Championship.
Oh, that's great.
So, good.
Well,
weather.
Cohasset High School may be in a
That's
a
what I was.
state
That's
championship,
what
yeah.
the fire chief told
Yeah,
me.
I bet he did.
Fire chief / football coach told me.
Proud coach.
Yeah, very exciting. So,
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Chris.
Have a safe trip home.
thank you.
You driving this evening?
Yeah. Unless I decide to stop.
Is there a ferry? Sorry.
Actually, there is. I don't
Yeah.
This time of year doesn't run that way. It's very nice to meet you.
Very much.
Talking about the Bridgeport Ferry?
Very nice to meet you, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you, Chris.
You're talking about
Safe
going out
trip
of
home.
Bridgeport?
I went to the one from New London.
Oh, yeah.
Even though for me, I'm all the way at the west end of the island, so the ferry doesn't really help that much.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
it's just nice. It's just a nice ride.
It
But
helps-
London saves 20 miles.
it helps when they're doing construction on 95.
Thanks, Tracy.
There were actually two giant blocks going. I was listening to the traffic on the way up, and there was 4 exits of the Connecticut Turnpike that were blocked.
Oh.
But that was 4 hours ago. So, and by now the traffic on 3
Keep
is
it-
okay now, right?
Yeah.
You taking 3 or you?
Well, I have to go back up to
95?
93. So,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. Is there a shortcut?
Oh, yeah.
No. it's- Remember that Saturday Night Live skit, you can't get there from here.
It's
You know
sometimes
what?
quicker to go to the Cape and cut over.
You might, seriously, you might want to take a deep breath, have a cup of coffee on the way out of town, okay, or in Hingham, over in Hingham on your way out. If you go just dodge into the village there, there's a little place called Brood Awakenings, very comfortable spot to park yourself for 45 minutes. And if you hit Route 3, approximately 6:15, you should have pretty clear sailing. Okay.
In here.
That's right. This time of year it's so hard to judge time. It's 5:15.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's 5:20.
Put on
Rude
some good
Awakenings.
music and
Brood
drive
Awakenings. It's
Hingham Square.
yeah, and it's you got GPS in the car. Yeah, so just plug that in.
Plug it
You're
right
fine.
into this.
Yeah, You're fine.
Thank you again,
Take
everybody.
care.
Great.
Take
Thank you
care.
very much.
Gonna take a 10-minute break, and
Please.
then we'll come back for discussion.
crunch the.
Okay, we all set? Okay, we're back in session. Next item on the agenda at 5:30 is discussion of town manager position candidates. So we've just finished the interviews, and I think all of us have been getting feedback from people that they think we have a good field here.
Yeah, I haven't, that's what I've heard globally.
Yeah.
I haven't heard any real specifics. Just a couple things that I wanted to, and I literally did this an hour before I came here, but I want to hand out, just for discussion if I can.
Yeah.
This is a feedback form that was used by the schools
Yeah.
when they did the search, and it would be something that would be anonymous, that we could make available to people that wanted to weigh in, especially employees or
Oh, yeah.
people that have already talked to them. And it's, as you can see, it's not very specific. It's, appears to be a good match, I'm neutral on it, or does not appear to be a good match.
Yeah.
And just to, you know, for your consideration, whether it's something we want to make available so that we get some kind of feedback from people who might not be willing to pick up the phone and call one of us.
Well, also, I think it's important, look, if folks from town hall and the departments have met with candidates, it's unfair for them to attach their name on a thumbs up or thumbs down that in any way might be traced back. Imagine
yeah.
imagine that they didn't have a favorable review of the candidate hired. You certainly don't want any potential for,
That turning up just
Richard, yeah.
before your job
Right.
yes,
review.
right,
Yeah.
you got it.
Not a good thing.
Yeah.
And the other piece to this whole thing is whether this could be considered as part of you know, the second round of interviews, which I put totally made it up off the top of my head schedule, because, you know, there are a lot of employees that haven't met with this person. It was department heads, and you know, there are some department heads that weren't available. I mean, none of them have met with Mary Gallagher, which I think would be a critical next meeting. So, you know, I would like to see if we can pare the list down a little bit, which I'm sure is going to be very difficult, but, you know, to see maybe the next step, have them here for a good chunk of the day and meeting with other stakeholders. At this point, I think it's really important to get as many of the employees engaged at whatever level we think makes sense, because they're the one that's going to have to work with this. This is going to be their boss for the next 3-6 years, hopefully, and more. So anyway, I'm just throwing it out there for discussion.
Okay. More discussion?
Well, Diane, thank you, because it's always good to have something to start with
with,
and
yeah.
work with and get, you know, thinking on a row. I mean, I'm presuming that we'd have 2 candidates come back for a second interview. So we'd have to have such as what we've done, we'd have to have an overlapping.
Yeah, or 2 different days or whatever. Yeah. I mean, I do think we should have that conversation about whether it's 2 or 3, and I don't have any 1, 2, or 3 yet even in my head, but I do think we want to hedge our bets, because a few of these guys are finalists at other jobs too, and I would hate to pare it down to 2 and
find
then
out
have
both.
somebody
Yeah,
back
yeah.
out, and then really just have 1 after we've sent the other guys off. So I don't know, it's just something to think about.
I think that it's useful to gather this information from department heads in advance of making your cut. I don't know that that's necessarily fits with the schedule, but I believe it's important. And it's important simply because if we're seeking not only executive skill, but an element that is much harder to quantify, and that's fit, I think you need that input. Having said that, I like the idea in a final interview to make it a process whereby there's a greater level of interaction. There's as many of you know, an addicted golfer. I have to go to meetings for that. But as a result, in mixing golf and business, there's an old saying: your true self comes out under the pressure of competition. And it's interesting to find out how different people act when they're in a setting that's both social, but at the same time somewhat business. You know, you have greater opportunities to see if in fact you're seeing the authentic person, or maybe one that's not quite so authentic. So I do believe that the you know, in weighing in on a second interview, I fully vote for a process that's more than just sitting in front of us again. That's got to be a part of it, but I do believe that there's an opportunity, excuse me, for different stakeholders, including townspeople. So I think it was it Kobayashi that made the point that there are towns that actually have an open house? Someone had mentioned it.
No,
I-
he didn't mention.
I might have mentioned,
Was it school? No, the school committee, I think,
yes,
had done
they did
this.
it.
In which some of their finalist candidates were, you know, in a public setting, had a chance to interact with anybody who really wanted to come and visit.
That's
Diane
what,
just put it on her.
yeah,
her
Abington did this. And actually, two of our 5 were finalists in the Abington town manager position. They ended up hiring, I think it was the Plymouth town manager, but they had had a social hour, and a lot of people from the community came, a lot of employees, and they actually had them mingling the 3 finalists in the same room, which was a little awkward, so
Yeah.
this one went across and started talking to that
Yeah.
townsperson or whatever. To me, that's a little
Maybe a little weird.
uncomfortable, I think, having the finalists all in one place, but I don't know.
Well,
But that's why I wrote down office hours, just have them available with somebody from staff or whatever, just to meet and greet anybody that wanted to make the time to stop in and say, hey, how you doing? My sister grew up in the town next to you, and whatever. Trying to start making those personal connections, because when they're here, it's a stage. Clearly, this is a performance, and it is that authentic self that we need to try to
But
get
if
a better.
they're all interviewing, all in the area, they get pretty used to it, and they sort of they break down in their interview.
Yep.
So you do get that feedback.
Yep.
Well, I think we should vote on our candidates and schedule something maybe next week, because it's getting into December and we're getting into holidays and so forth, and we don't want to get too far into December until we make a decision.
Well, I sort of share Diane's concern, maybe from a little different tick on it, but not only in having, 3 candidates, consider having 3 candidates, but also they are interviewing, and I have to wonder, one of the candidates did ask us what our time frame was. Is
Right.
he considering an offer from another town?
Right.
So I don't want to rush the process, but I don't want to extend it either, because I don't want to have a candidate, one of our top candidates, whoever that might be, to lose them because we're trying to cover all the bases and, cross all the Ts and dot all the Is. And so I'm kind of torn on it, but
Yeah,
I really, we've already lost one candidate.
Yeah, I'm torn on it too, in the sense that, next week is Thanksgiving and then we're into the holidays, but that one candidate, from what I've read, that we lost, went to an interview and was driving home and got the phone call to say, hey,
But it might have been
so
a second
things can
interview,
happen
right?
just
Oh,
like that,
absolutely.
yeah.
Go ahead,
So,
fast.
well, here's, I just want to piggyback off what Steve said about, I would like to get some feedback from the department heads that have met them, because I will tell you, one person did tell me who they really liked. This was yesterday.
They haven't heard today yet.
Right. And that person said,
It's really too bad that, well,
just kind of did a, really, really like that person. And this is a staff person, and it was probably my number 5. So I really want to get a little more
Well, is there a
input.
way we can trigger some feedback from the department heads that were able to attend these meetings, just, you know,
Why
anonymously
couldn't
like
we
this?
just send it out as an email and have
Oh,
it
yeah,
come
absolutely.
back.
Well,
Yeah.
well, this,
I'm just
I,
saying,
I
They
got-
oughta, they probably wanna do it anonymously.
yeah,
Well,
Yes.
Tracy can,
well, they
Well-
could print it out and
But
leave
if-
it here.
I think it's worthwhile not just to ask for a broad thing, but to guide it, because you're looking for specific things. And the guidance I'd suggest that you're looking for is, along the lines of what you have here, is there a fit? Can you rank it? And the second part of it is, ask them to be specific about one or two things that struck them very positively about any particular candidate. What is it that that candidate might have said, or how did they act, that elicited your favorable response or negative response, whatever it might be? And because it's not enough from my perspective to ask someone to say, did you like them or not?
well, and the other thing, Steve, I think is, yes, I understand, and I have no problem with the anonymity, but the piece that you lose from the anonymity is what perspective is that person coming from? And that's an important factor, I believe, and
Karen, if I could, in good conscience, lose the anonymity, I would.
No,
That
I
might
just,
be-
I know we have to do it, but I just.
I don't know that we do have to do it.
Well,
I
people
just,
have the
I
option to
fear
do
the
either
other
way.
op,
Right.
the
They
other
can
op,
do-
But
yeah,
the
they
the
possibility.
other thing that I've found, Diane, similar to yourself, I've had some residents and people call, and I've, obviously been very neutral in my comments to them, but, as important as the feedback is, many of the people are commenting either from reading things on a blog or, a newspaper report or something, and they didn't see the interviews, they weren't here, they've read the resumes. So comments are also being made, they know of this person. Somebody has told them this person is good, and I think that we have to take all that into consideration and evaluate it. But really what it comes down to is, what do the 5 people sitting here think? Who do we feel is going to be the best fit? As Diane said earlier, we don't want the community to fail, we don't want the town manager to fail. We want to set things up for success for everybody.
But go ahead, I'm
No,
sorry.
the
I'll
only
cut you
thing
off.
I would add to that is, we're the hiring authority, but this person is gonna be the boss of X. So,
Absolutely,
and-
but
And to something like this, the anonymous feedback, maybe we just send it out to those department heads that actually met with them. I don't necessarily want somebody that's just read through a resume and has a brother-in-law
right,
that lives
yeah,
in
yeah.
Westerly, Rhode Island,
No,
or
no,
whatever it is.
Oh, I thought that was the intent, was that the only people that would receive this
Yes,
were
that's
folks
why I
that
just wanna
intersected with
clarify
it,
that, 'cause
right?
I want it
But
to be
yeah.
real.
the other little conflict that I see here is, in doing that, they're going to be commenting on 5 candidates.
Right.
And I feel some urgency in paring it down to a top 2 or 3, because I do think that they are all candidates in other searches. So, it's not that I don't value input, have been for many years a big supporter of all the town employees.
So let me ask
This is a
each of you, though,
Problem.
to think about this, and I, by the way, yes, we are the hiring authority, and my view on, first of all, the reason that I originally asked for the interviews to also proceed to department heads,
Which
Was-
was a great suggestion.
well, no, it was to help me to learn something that I wouldn't otherwise learn. Look, what Carl Sestito or what Chief Sylvia might ask a potential candidate, or town manager candidate, is going to be very different than what we ask, because they see the world from a perspective that we don't see every day. So that, it was really to inform my perceptions, and that's what I'm looking for. And, if let's say we pare this down to 2, with the intent of moving along, there's 2 things that I see happening. Number one, we're immediately telling the audience, the folks who gave of their day to go through this, that thanks, we'll get to you, we'll get your feedback soon enough, which essentially discounts its value. And that's not a message that I really want to send.
none
And
of us do.
and the second piece of that is we may end up choosing people based upon what we saw here, who actually rank at the bottom. Not that it would change our view, but it might have informed our view to make a choice somewhat differently. So that's the reason for it. Karen, you know, I understand the reluctance the reluctance to hold up the process right now. You know, in my mind, I have the top 2 or 3 that I prefer based upon the interviews.
And I also.
And I would worry that, you know, one of those would be drawn out. But
Let me propose
can we get this done fast?
Well, that's what I was just going to say. Could we not send this out, Tracy? Could we, the royal we, not send this out to the pertinent people and have them respond tomorrow to us? And then we could meet
Yeah,
either
Friday
tomorrow
night.
night or Friday.
Or after.
We can't meet tomorrow because we can't post.
Oh, we
but
can't
could
post,
No,
right.
we could do it on
Okay.
Saturday after the town meeting.
Oh,
You
have to be
very
you've
short.
got, yeah, you can do it on Saturday.
You could do it on
because we've got
Saturday,
Because we're all
special
gonna be
town meeting.
there.
That's a good,
Yeah,
good
we can
point,
do it on
Martha.
Saturday, since we all have,
I mean,
and yet we got the input, yeah. Okay? I think that's excellent.
so
You
now
can
the
post-
chair is gonna weigh in
Um,
here.
Okay, so the potential, well, there's a meeting posted Saturday that like goes through special town meeting past that. The 26th, the red line is not gonna be ready till the 3rd, so, but we could, you know, meet also on the 26th with this. So the idea would be, I guess the question is, when do we get the feedback where we feel fully informed
Could we,
to make a
if we,
cut?
if we send it out, people received it tomorrow, and, I mean, most people work on a deadline, so if you give them 3 days to respond, they're gonna respond on the 3rd day. So
Yeah.
if we said we'd like it by the end of business tomorrow, I mean, they
right, this
They
is,
know.
this is
Yeah.
easy.
this is
Right,
easy.
we're not asking
Yeah.
much.
Yeah, I mean,
So
well,
then we get it, we can vote on our top candidates on Saturday, and if the candidates are available, we could have a second round on the 26th.
On the 26th, that makes sense, yeah.
I mean,
That
I
gives
know that
everybody
it's
time.
very rushed, but
no, I'm thinking of my work schedule. I
Oh,
can't
yeah, I
do
know.
the 26th. This is
but
Could
you
you do it in
already
the evening?
said you
the
could.
evening, yeah, but you're
Well,
talking,
I'm talking-
we're talking
evening.
about a slightly
Well,
more.
it doesn't
Well,
have
we-
to be all the members of the board. I
Well,
mean, this would be,
we could do the interviews in the evening.
That's kind of how I worked this out, was
yeah, yeah.
that
Well,
would be,
well, this could kind of shift
Yeah,
a little
we
bit
could
that
absolutely
way.
Shift it
right.
up.
This is,
I too was thinking of the
So those that
evening.
can't make it during the day obviously couldn't meet, but, I mean, if you're cutting it down to 3,
Unless you did.
and Steve and I
Monday
are
and
stuck in Boston during the day, that's one each with a candidate for that time period.
Well, I would think maybe you could, if you have 3, then you could split it, some Monday and some Tuesday, in the
That's-
evening.
Well, you'd have to have a meeting posted for Monday night, because, I mean, some of these people are traveling significant distances.
Right.
Well, that's what I mean. You
Yeah.
could post either night.
you know, I don't,
Well,
I,
again,
I,
guys, with due respect, I understand the need to move this along,
Yeah.
and I appreciate that, and I did sign up for the work, but I also
You
have to
work.
dedicate some,
Oh, I
yeah.
know you
this-
do. That's what I was trying to figure. If you split it 2 days and had.
Well, that's the whole point, Martha, is splitting it up by
Well-
2 days is a whole different thing.
I think
Part
that-
of it is just mapping this out.
Yeah.
My schedule at this point in the year is
If-
pretty well
Yeah.
mapped
What
out
if
for
the-
some time.
The selectmen interviews were in the evening,
That's,
right? And as I look at this, and I think Diane's purpose, and, you know, I don't wanna, my interpretation of your purpose was that to give the candidates an opportunity to meet with, you know, certain key, committee and commission people, to have an open time for the public to come and to get a tour of the facilities. So that doesn't necessarily involve selectmen.
that's true.
no, that's true, but
It also, but it does involve a lot of, I mean, other than the town employees, which, as far as I'm concerned, is the most important group of stakeholders
Well-
that need to be involved, but it will involve people during a workday, you know, I mean, ultimately, I do think they should meet with, you know, Peter Pescatori, who has a job, or, you know.
Well, I bet that's a problem, but even at your
Right.
11:20 proposed schedule, that's a problem.
Oh, absolutely,
You know,
absolutely.
So,
It's-
you know, it may be unrealistic to be able
I
to
agree.
do this within a daytime frame.
Yep.
Um,
I do, and I already know what the feedback will be, but I do think we have to be very realistic as well, that next week is a holiday week. And many of these candidates could be traveling. I think I would be shocked if we can actually make the second round of interviews happen next week.
For the 26th, you mean?
Well, maybe one on the 26th, but I mean, Wednesday's out of the question.
yeah, no, no, no.
Thursday's out of the question.
And that's why I
Friday's
was
You
out of the
mentioned
thinking either
traveling to an
Monday-
interview on
I
Wednesday.
know, right? That's right,
I'm
they gotta
sorry.
travel.
I'm sorry, I'm stuck on the pike.
Nothing on Wednesday. You can't-
Well,
The only thing is.
I mean,
we would-
I can be very wrong in this, but it seemed to me that the candidates were
Are
very
eager.
eager and accommodating in setting
yeah.
up the schedules, and,
We should.
I mean, I would think that they would want a resolution on this as well, so that they would know.
They might, but if I can interject, I mean, some of the folks that I've been fortunate to hire and unlucky enough not to have had the opportunity to hire have made it clear that while they're eager for the job, or they're eager to be considered as a finalist for the job, that any number of things arise that will interfere with my plans for an interview, or an interview time, not the least of which are family commitments, and surprisingly, this particular week is a very difficult week to schedule people, especially at the last minute, because and I'm not trying to put a damper or presuppose what's going to happen. I'm just trying
The
to
worst-
gauge
The
expectations.
worst that people can say is no, but if you don't ask, they can't
It's fine,
say yes.
it's fine, but we're making our plans based on it as well. We've
We-
already got the
we-
meeting scheduled. I'm just
It's
saying,
tentatively scheduled to meet that night anyway, so.
I'm suggesting that we think about what the backup plan is. That's
Well,
all.
I mean, there could be a candidate that, let's hypothetically, we narrow it to 3, and 2 can make it, and one just says, I'm sorry, I can't make it that week. But we could get a lot of good feedback where we say, you know what, that, we're getting so much good feedback on, that we're gonna let that roll in with the other 2 and make, you know, so I don't know, we just don't know how it goes until we ask, and it falls out the way it does.
Could I suggest that we, we kind of narrow in on, like, what, I mean, I built this schedule as a 5-hour schedule,
Yeah.
so, you know, I think we should, if nothing else, post for Monday, because we're not gonna know, assuming we decide this on Saturday
Okay.
morning, that's too
All right,
late to
so
post for
tomorrow
Monday.
I can post for Monday and Tuesday, all right?
And I would post like a whole afternoon kind of thing, just in, and it may be that
Yeah.
we're not,
Okay,
a
so.
quorum of us
yeah,
aren't in any
yeah,
one place till the evening,
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
which I don't think I can do Monday
Well,
evening.
what
but
I can
that's
do
another
is,
story.
when I propose this, I'll post this proposed schedule here, but extend it, the time, so, I'll work something out anyway, and then if we get it finalized, I can just
The
do an
finals in the
amendment,
evening,
yeah.
so
Well, I mean,
Steve can come.
I mean, the other thing is that, you know, like, David Farag has a thriving practice, so he may not be available.
I totally made up.
It's none,
Right. I
yeah,
know.
none of this
That's
stuff
right.
may come to fruition, but
Right.
there's an opportunity for things to happen.
Yep.
They either happen or they don't,
yeah.
but it will give us more feedback than we have now,
Mm-hmm.
and help make a more informed decision. But if we look at Monday and Tuesday as trying to get as much of this stuff done, and then we're, you know, into the holiday, and then we're meeting on the 3rd.
Yeah. Okay. That's fine. So are we going to decide on our
Shoot,
2 or 3
I
candidates?
can't do Monday night.
I can't, I don't think I can either, but
What is that? I'm sorry.
Monday looks
I can't do
problematic.
Monday night.
Then that leaves Tuesday. I mean, it's really, we have to have all 5 selectmen make this decision. That's
Absolutely.
unthinkable.
So Martha, to your question, I think we were thinking about waiting till Saturday, once we
Are we
get the
gonna do that?
feedback.
Oh, no, that's fine.
right?
That's fine. No, that's fine. That's
Did-
fine. That's fine.
Because we can go home, we can pour, I mean,
Yeah.
I haven't had a chance to pour through all my notes, to be
I
honest
I
with
have
you,
to,
I
I
am
have to do,
completely
yeah,
ill-equipped.
I have to do, I mean, I got a ton of notes, but I need to like kind of get my stuff organized on it, so.
No,
Fred-
that's fine. That's fine.
Did you have an opportunity to talk to Dick Kobayashi about the background checks and the like?
Not yet, no. I will, I made a note yesterday,
And
but
it's-
I haven't done it yet.
It's it would seem to me it's unnecessary to look at anybody's until we've decided on who the finalists are. But at that point, I think it'd be worthwhile.
Yeah, I seem to recall that there was some issues around that, but obviously if they didn't make it through the background checks, they wouldn't be in front of us, so I don't know what we're
We
looking
just
No,
for.
need
well,
confirmation on
yeah.
that.
This is where I
Yeah.
have a reason to ask, and
Yeah.
it is, as Karen made the point earlier, we're the hiring authority. It's our decision, and I want to be on absolutely sure ground, and I'm not willing to cede that ground to a third party who just tells me thumbs up or thumbs down. I don't think that's fair to the town.
Well, he's been very successful in doing
I'm
that.
sure he
Well,
has.
perhaps you
I'm-
could just provide us with a summary report. I mean,
Summary,
if there are legal issues regarding.
I generally agree with you.
I don't know whether, I have no idea
I'm,
whether there
Yeah.
are legal issues.
And I think if there were very bad issues, he wouldn't have presented to us.
Okay.
I once again trust my own judgment more than I trust any other person's judgment, and I make my living assessing risk.
Well, that's true,
Okay.
you do.
And likewise, we all took on this role to exercise our judgment rather than to cede it to others. So that's the basis for it, and that's the basis for my request.
On that, kind of in that same vein, but a little bit the next step after the next step. I mean, that is something I would like us to talk about once we have our list pared down. You know, how we want to go about, because I don't think each and
Yeah.
every one of us
Questions?
want to be calling every single
No,
town that they've worked for. I
absolutely.
think we need to split that up, and because that was a responsibility I did cede to the last consultant that I regret.
Yeah, he kind of said, hey,
Don't worry about it.
don't worry about it.
Everything's-
everybody's gonna have
everything's
It's
cool.
fine, I
Yeah,
wouldn't
I
give
mean,
them to you.
as the more I think
Fine.
about it, I think one of the issues, Steve, might be that once we get anything, it becomes a public record, and some of that stuff is held in an executive committee to avoid that from happening.
Correct.
There must be a way,
Well, you could,
okay? And
maybe the best thing is just you call Dick yourself and
Okay.
ask him, what can he tell you?
that's fair.
Yeah, and then, because I.
And then we all
my-
have
my
to
s-
trust Steve, even
yeah.
though he's not willing to
No,
trust.
along those lines, I believe, and I could be wrong, town council could amend this, but I believe a personal conversation with Dick Kobayashi can
would
be kept to
excluded.
myself.
Exactly, yeah.
Likewise,
Yeah.
a
Oh, no,
personal,
I.
no, I wouldn't, no,
you
I'd
could
be
come
using it for
forward and
me.
You
Yeah.
can come forward and you can say, I can't vote for this candidate because of what Dick Kobayashi told us.
No, and that's the thing, it's individual at that point, and you're exercising your judgment based upon what you know individually. I can't discuss it with any of you.
Right.
I'm uncomfortable with any one board member having information the other board members don't have.
What I'm encouraging is that if you go forward with it, that if I were to make that call, it's an available call, and it's one I would encourage each
That
of you to
We
make.
should each do as well.
But if we
to Dick.
each do it,
It's not public because it
But-
goes from him to you, and I think
But,
that town
what I
council
don't
could weigh on
understand
that.
is why would we call up and suddenly say, hey, Dick, say, oh yeah, there's something about that candidate. They wouldn't be in front of us.
No, it's not about whether or not there's something about that candidate. Again, I'm not willing to cede my judgment to anybody when it comes to a hire like this. And examples, there may be any number of things that would have been identified in a background check which would not have knocked them
Why don't
out
we
in
do
Dick's
this?
view.
I
Listening
just
to
think
what
that
Karen said,
everybody needs to know everything on an
Why-
equal basis.
why don't I send an email to Dick? Is there anything else that you can supply the full board with related to these candidates legally?
That's a great suggestion, yeah.
Well, what I think what I would like to know, and I apologize, because I'm pretty sure I asked this question to Dick, and I can't remember the answer, but I want to know exactly, other than just checking references, which is something that I think we're going to have to do as well, and that's not the kind of information I think they're doing background checks.
Yeah.
What did that entail? Did you do a credit check? Did you do a criminal background
Wasn't it
check?
spelled out in the,
I think
That's
it's in
what
the
I'm
scope.
saying.
I think
Credit-
it's in the
credit,
scope of
Corey.
service.
I
it's
just-
in the scope of services.
Right,
doesn't
so
it?
I just want to know, right,
It's in the
assuming
scope of
that's it,
services,
and then
yeah.
just find out from him whether there was anything, anything, I don't know, what is information that we can have? He said he did it. What does that mean?
Well,
You know,
trust
what
his
if somebody,
word.
you know, I'm just gonna
It
make it
comes-
up,
it-
I don't know if it's relevant, but what if somebody filed for bankruptcy 3 times in the last 20 years? He might have found that out on a credit check, and is that relevant to our deliberations? Maybe, but maybe he's, you know, he hasn't had any issues in the past 10 years or whatever, I don't know, and then, you know, what can he tell us about that? What if he found something out?
I would think my sense is if they found something out about that candidate, that would have excluded them from the pool, that we have the best candidates of all the,
I understand, Fred.
Yeah.
Trust but verify. And we're gauging this based upon a third party's judgment, which we did not inform. Okay? We did not say, by the way, a record of misdemeanor arrest bounces them out. A record that shows that personal financial irresponsibility would be a red flag to us. And so as a result, we're expecting that the judgment exercised by Kobayashi matches up with our own, and it may. I'm simply asking for verification, that's all. And I think it's reasonable. We're making the hire that essentially runs all the operations of the town and is the chief financial officer and the chief procurement officer and so on.
I agree with Fred, and I do have a level of trust, and maybe that's misplaced, but I don't think so. And I don't have a problem with asking the question. I just think
Okay.
that any information should be equal across the board, so that we should all be making a decision having the same information.
That's fair.
Agreed.
That's it, and that's
Get-
just reasonable.
Get the information
Figure out how we can get
before
the
Saturday.
universal information that we need.
I mean, perhaps they could,
No.
Mr. Kobayashi could say, you know, here are the checks that we did, and here are the criteria that we use. And he doesn't have to say how those checks came out on anybody, but if he were to say there were, you know, if there were a bankruptcy, that would have excluded somebody. If there was a criminal record,
Exactly.
that would have excluded somebody.
Exactly right. That's-
So he would not necessarily be saying that there was a negative on anybody.
Just to make sure, Martha, you're clear on this, I'm not asking for this prior to making the final selections. I'm asking for it once we've narrowed the list, then I think it's time to ask for it.
Okay.
An interesting point on that is when we did the last hire, we did after, and the consultant did some background checks initially, but then we did a background check before the hire. I wasn't involved in that.
Yeah.
It was, I think the chairman and the vice chairman at the time.
yeah.
So I don't know what that entailed, but we could actually do our own background check, credit background check before we make a hire, or we could make an offer subject to
Okay.
something.
Well,
Yeah,
we just need to this is getting into the whole employment law thing,
Right.
which is tricky.
Right.
So we just need to run it by Kobayashi and town council, make sure we're not
Find
making
out what we
missteps.
can
Right.
do.
But, yeah,
I certainly don't want
It's not
to, in
unreasonable, yeah.
asking the questions, I don't want to expose the town to anything
Yeah.
further, but likewise, by not asking the questions, I don't want to expose the town to
town,
anything
right.
further.
yeah.
Fair enough.
All right, well, I will put an email together and CC everybody tomorrow to town council and to Kobayashi, asking what else, you know,
Okay.
on
So
this.
could we just, you're gonna talk to town council and Kobayashi?
Yeah.
CC everybody on that. Tracy's gonna send out the form, or Jen, or both of you.
I
As long
will.
as somebody goes, okay.
Can,
And we're going to ask for our responses by end of business tomorrow. Whoever met with the gentleman, right?
just to fill out one on each candidate, and they don't, you know, they might not wanna weigh in on anybody negative.
not wanna-
Well, they might not want to,
Right.
Whatever
whatever they wanna
feel
do.
Whatever
should
they
know
wanna-
Is gonna
to
help
us
us.
making a decision,
make
yeah.
the decision.
And
We're going to meet on Saturday after
the town meeting.
town meeting to make a cut, whether that's 2 or 3. We'll determine that. Who is going to reach out to the candidates? I mean, if we do that on Saturday,
You can send emails
Not much
to
is
them.
gonna happen Monday and Tuesday, yeah.
Well,
They expect, candidates expect that, that it goes fast. They do that, they clear the whole deck.
No, but the point is, if we make a cut on, Saturday cut, there's no one to staff it out, like getting everybody in here for Tuesday.
Well, maybe we
I
can.
mean,
hi-
it has to, I guess it would happen first thing Monday morning, but that's short notice for people,
No,
like,
that's,
hey,
that's.
can you be up here in Cohasset tomorrow,
when can-
for the
well,
whole
5
day?
hours?
I,
I'll buy you a
Is
pizza.
there any way to hire somebody?
we do have, on each of these candidates, that we do have cell phone numbers, we have email, and so on. So alerting the finalists would be pretty easy.
It's not that, it's setting up all this
No,
stuff.
no, I understand that. But, I mean, we could, as a matter of fact,
That
we
could-
ought to.
that
If
could
you're
be
thinking
done.
Tuesday is gonna be done, is going to be the day that you're focused on right now.
He's gonna post Monday too.
Well, remember,
they
I,
can't
no
do
matter
Monday.
what, I can't make Monday.
they
Oh, you
can't do
can't.
Monday, so
Okay,
Monday's
okay.
out.
Okay.
That's okay.
So, just let's schedule Tuesday. And the worst that happens is we have to call it off because no candidate can make it.
Yeah,
So, but we'll have it scheduled. Let's go ahead and, I mean, today is, what is today? Today's Wednesday. So we've got 3 work days,
It's too
Thursday,
bad
Friday,
we
and
couldn't-
Monday to schedule that.
Sad we can't vote today, because that would be.
Because we know that Tracy and Jen didn't have anything else to do for
I
those
know.
3 days.
Yeah,
Nothing.
yeah.
Get ready for their own.
Well, if
Thanksgiving.
voting on Saturday, then you've got
When
telephone
does town
numbers
hall
to
close
call
on
them.
Wednesday?
Oh, that's half day.
Do you usually work on Friday?
No,
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 no.
no, that's right, you do have
Oh.
a regular day.
So the other thing just to keep in mind
better
is
get
we
a
should
municipal
probably,
job.
I know, we should probably keep. We should probably, hey,
I've never had the day after
Uh-huh.
Thanksgiving off.
Stuff, but we could call, you could call the candidates being chair. The ones would be the finalists.
We could call right from the floor of town meeting if there's cell
Yeah.
service.
right, but
but he's
this
being
is,
realistic about.
this is a big schedule to set up, I'm gonna tell
we
somebody
have
to
to
show
do
up here at 11 and stuff isn't set up,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot of work. This is a full day of
Yeah,
No,
holding meetings
I-
together.
Yeah.
I agree, Fred, and it's a,
well,
no
maybe
matter,
they
no
can't do
matter,
all of that.
no matter what, it's a
Well,
full
maybe,
day.
maybe it's a condensed version of this, because I mean, other than the town employees who would be here, I have concern about whether any of the, the finance team
Well,
would be here.
I just had an
Like-
idea.
Mhm.
We could make a preliminary call tomorrow saying, if you make the cut, which is happening Saturday, you'll be available
That's a good
Tuesday from
idea.
11 a.m. to whatever.
6,
You
probably.
can certainly make the conditional call, it's, please God, make
Couldn't
sure
you
it's an
Could you
if.
condense some of that? No, I guess not.
I mean, it's one thing if you're calling somebody up, hey, can you meet me for coffee at 4 o'clock?
Absolutely.
I think,
That doesn't take a lot of
Right, I don't-
arranging,
Is it,
I think it would be nice for them to have a facility tour, but I think they've been to town hall.
And I don't.
I don't think that it's critical for them to see fire and police and DPW, water and sewer.
Well, they might have seen
I mean, I
some
think
of
it's
this.
nice.
They might
yeah,
have seen
well, I'll
some of
tell you
this.
why it's important, I think. And it's not really the facilities. It's that when you bring somebody over to the police station, they're gonna meet Detective Lennon, who's not gonna be able to come over here for a meeting necessarily, or they're gonna meet the guys over at the fire
But
station.
at this point,
At this point, I'd rather wait another day and do it right.
oh no, I'm just saying that at this point, him having met any citizen or town employee, there really isn't a lot of time there for feedback. Do you understand what I'm saying, Diane?
Yeah, but
it's not-
chances are, we're not gonna make a decision, right after we're having these second interviews. That
You
night.
never know. It might be obvious when we do it.
Well, I don't want to be an obstacle, so just
No, but it's,
Go and-
it's.
go and
let
do,
me see
go and
this again.
prosper.
I mean, I think that, public officer. I mean, you don't even know if these guys are around to meet with them.
Oh, absolutely.
I
I
mean,
mean,
that's what I
to
think
be
if
honest
we-
with you, when I put this schedule together, and again, I'm not trying to sell this. I'm not an advocate for it. I just am
No, I
using
think
this
it's
as a
great that you,
template to
that
begin.
you did it,
It's a
Diane,
good
and I'm
i-
not
it's a
trying
good
to
idea.
be.
It's
But
a
I,
good
what I was
idea.
thinking about was this, we did this the last time around, and it was very good because they got out on the streets. They went over to DPW, they met everybody over at DPW. They literally met almost every employee. But I was thinking of this as after the week after Thanksgiving, to be perfectly honest with you, because I can't imagine
Well, we
getting
don't-
stuff through next week.
We don't know how this will work out.
If, I would like to make the,
chair.
not that I'm gonna be doing it, Fred. I think it's important to make the outreach and to see if the candidates are available. That makes the decision for us. If they're available, they're available, and if they're not, they're
then
not.
we do it.
And then we just go from there. I just am very concerned about losing candidates that are participating in other searches. I mean, the only
So-
reason that I can think of for one of the candidates to ask us for a time frame is because he's,
Sure, absolutely. And one of the things, I know that we've received 2 thank you notes
Yeah.
to emails, and so maybe what you could do, Fred, on behalf of the board, is to email all 5, or have Tracy do it on your behalf, tomorrow, and just say, thank you so much, the board, enjoyed meeting with everybody and hearing your things. We are preliminarily scheduling, a good chunk of the day on Tuesday.
that's
And-
probably better than phone calls.
And,
Yeah, yeah.
and are you even available, so, to help us make the scheduling thing? We can
It's not better for
communicate via
Tracy.
email to try to schedule things. So Tracy might say, I've heard back from 4 of them. They're all going away for Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And then we know it's not realistic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Excellent idea.
That's
And
a
we'll
good
go
idea.
for the following week.
Yep.
Yeah.
But we can still vote sometime.
And emails are easy because you don't have to get into a
Yeah,
conversation.
can you do that? Because
don't
I've kind of got
reply.
my plate full with some other stuff, this in work, so that'd be great if you could do that tomorrow. And just then let us know how it looks like Tuesday might be shaping up. Okay, yep. Okay, and then,
You got all 5 emails?
And then just projecting, if it were the following week, are there any days that any of us are completely, other than I have 2 concerts at the end of the week, but if there's anything, if there's a day that following week that we're just completely, one of us is completely out of commission.
well, anything after Wednesday's bad for me.
Wednesday, which?
The
5th.
4th.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
4th.
you're going, when do you, the 4th?
Wednesday, the 4th is fine, but the 5th and 6th, it's bad.
Okay,
Yeah, right now, I mean, the way it looks for me right now, the 2nd and 3rd
they are good.
are reserved.
For us?
No, for me, I'm, no, I've
So-
I've got,
That's
Well, we
good
have a
idea.
meeting on the 3rd, right?
I mean,
yeah, but the
it
day
kinda-
of the 3rd,
I mean, just checking the
if
schedules.
you're talking on the evenings, that's a different thing.
It occurs to me, not to be belaboring the point, but people's schedules are filling up in December, and the availability of the board to deal with this is being pushed off, and I really am afraid of losing all our candidates.
No, wait, the availability of the board is
And I don't
still,
mean that that's
still
a-
scheduled,
3 of
right?
these people don't have jobs right now, so I think that I'm not that concerned.
No, but they may get
No,
job
I
offers,
understand.
Diane, that's,
Yeah.
that's the thing that I'm
That's what
concerned
I'm-
about.
I know one of them is a finalist in another town.
So, I mean, I am concerned that if Steve is unavailable the beginning of the week of the 2nd, and Fred is unavailable the end of the week, then we're looking at mid-December.
And we're gonna lose all 5.
No, let me make sure I'm clear about this. My days are booked. I can be available for an evening.
Evening,
For
5.
my days, this is the period of of the year where.
I understand that, and I
Gotta-
respect that, Steve.
gotta be there.
I understood you to say that you were unavailable.
Yeah, the days of the second and the third.
period. But you are available in the evenings.
The evenings I can make it. I've got,
Okay,
I've got local meetings in Providence, both of those days that are reserved.
25th? What is it? Monday,
For Tuesday, the 26th.
yeah,
For
but
Tuesday, they-
weren't you gonna post it for Monday in case?
No.
But they
It's not
can't make it
available.
Monday.
They can't
so-
make it, okay, okay.
All right. What do we have to conclude at this point?
So we have to post meetings for, well, Saturday.
Saturday's already posted.
Okay, and it
So-
doesn't matter that we morph into this.
For
Oh.
Tuesday.
Okay.
Tuesday, I will post tomorrow.
I'm gonna send Tracy this. I may, in the comments section, just in parentheses, put a prompt, you know, consider listing one or two things that struck you as favorable or negative or something. Ask them to send it to,
Are
right,
these to remain, did we conclude?
Confidential.
Are they, the confidential, are they to remain anonymous?
It's up to them. If people want to sign their name, they can sign it. If they want to be
Okay. All right, fair
anonymous.
enough.
They can be
Be
anonymous.
anonymous. Unanimous.
that too. Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah.
I vote for everything I've said.
Everything I said, yes, that's right.
Okay.
But that's all right, I've had supper.
Are we ready to adjourn?
Sure.
Yes,
Okay, motion to adjourn?
so moved.
Second, any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Tracy, who's in here? Who have we held up tonight?
Well,
Tell 'em they've got the
we're
room.
really imposing on this.